Justin Chadwick is a British director whose works include The Other Berlin Girl, The First Grader, and more recently Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. The film stars British actors Idris Elba and Naomi Harris as Nelson and Winnie Mandela. We spoke to director Justin Chadwick about his latest film, Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. So firstly, thank you very much for agreeing to meet us. How did you get into directing?
Well, I was at school and a teacher, not knowing what to do with all my energy, suggested that I go to this theatre that had a youth programme, a youth theatre. So I went there. I was 11, and the first play that they were putting on was called Kes, which was, about a boy from the north who was obsessed with this kestrel, and I ended up being in this play, and then that kind of led on to Manchester Youth Theatre, and then that led on to me going to college and doing a degree in drama, and led on to my directing, and then through BBC and through kind of making short movies, I then kind of started to get work as a director.
Brilliant. And what were your initial aims with Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom?
My initial aims were, I was quite hesitant about getting involved in the film because it's such a huge, big story, and it was to try and make it relevant to an audience now. Mandela's life is kind of 100 years of apartheid history, which is one of the most well-documented periods of history ever. So it was to try and kind of do something different that wasn't a documentary, that was more of a film about the man and the cost of the man, and the cost to him as a dad, and the cost to him as a husband, and the cost to him personally. We can read the history books, and he's inspiring, and he did lots of amazing things. But I wanted to understand him intimately, and his relationship with Winnie, and his relationship with his children. And I was very, very fortunate that I had access to those people, and Mandela himself. So it was really to make a film that an audience could relate to, because he's just like them. Mandela was a young man who had hopes and ambitions like any other young person, and yet what he did and what he achieved, and to try and make that relatable in some way, and inspire another generation, and inspire a generation to look at their leaders and to look at what a leader can be. Mandela is so much and represents so much, so it was to make an accessible movie to a global audience, really.
Brilliant. And I noticed an interview in which you stated that truth was the key element for the film, and I wondered if you had a copy of the autobiography beside you the whole time, just to check everything twice. And
no, not really. I mean, I read the book. The book, I don't know if you've read the book. The book is a huge, big tome of a book. It's really, I mean, it's fantastic, but it's a massive, sprawling book. I read the book. I think it was more really the meeting people that were involved in the story, meeting people that had lived through the struggle and been part of Mandela's life. That, to be true to them, always, when you're making a film about people that are very much alive. I mean, Mandela was alive all the way through until our premiere, and he sadly passed, but he was alive while we were making the film, as were a lot of the people that we were representing. So to be true to them, to be true to their spirit, and from what you would find in the house, in a drawer, had to be detailed and true. What they did had to be detailed and true, but we were never kind of conscious that to be kind of weighed down by that. There was a responsibility to be always truthful, and to try and make sure that the sets and the people and the acting was real, and that was the kind of thing that pushed us forward and made us. We all gathered around that. That was when you have that kind of, when you want to make something that is about dropping the audience into a 360-degree real world that's detailed and true, then that gives everybody a kind of, right, that's what we're going to go for, that's what we're going to do. It's not going to be kind of a thing that you can't relate to and you can't touch. We wanted to put the audience right in amongst that movie.
Yes. Is that why you chose William Nicholson as the scriptwriter? Because I understand he used to work for the BBC as a documentary writer. Did that affect your choice of scriptwriter?
Well, he was on. No, Bill was on before I was. Bill was on, Bill's been writing this film for 20 years, but it's interesting you should say that. No one's picked up on that in all the conversations that I've had with any journalist or anybody about Bill having that journalistic background and having a documentary background. it was. I mean, he's a terrific screenwriter, Bill Nicholson. And, you know, he's written Gladiator and big movies. He is like I am. When we were very concerned to make sure that it was representative of the people, but then we had this huge task to kind of it had to accelerate the audience through 100-year history as well. But I think that definitely helped me and Bill click, because the writer and director have got to be completely on the same page with the film, and that, you know, shoulder to shoulder working was fantastic. I mean, once we found the central love story between Winnie and Mandela was going to be the key to the film, Bill and I then rewrote the whole script with that through line as the arc of the film, and we knew through the prism of the relationship we could then explore the apartheid history.
Brilliant. I understand that you met Mandela. What was it like, and was he able to see any of the rushes of the film?
Yeah, I met Mandela. I had an afternoon tea with him, rounded at his house, and it was just before his 94th birthday, just before we started filming. And I mean, people talk about the Madiba effect. I mean, whole stadiums would kind of go up with his aura, and I can only say that, you know, my experience of that was, it was like electricity, the energy that came off him. Such an unbelievably inspiring man, sharp, knew we had these photographs with us, and he knew where he was and who he was with, and incredibly sharp man, and a warm man, and the people around him, you could see he was a very well loved man. So I had a great time, and we kept him up to speed with what we were doing. My producer, Nancy, had written to him while he was in prison, so he had a very long relationship with him. So he was able to go around and show him scenes and photographs from the movie, and we showed on the very first week, Idris, we did the last shot of the film. It's a very, very long, complicated shot, and we took that to show him, and he watched it, and he looked at it, and Nancy goes, "Is that me?" And so that was like, we heard that right at the beginning of the process. So it was like, for me and Idris Elba, who, you know, we were worried about him playing the old man, you know, because he's a young man. When we heard that, we knew we had his blessing, and we knew that, you know, to have that as filmmakers meant everything.
Well, with Idris Elba as Mandela, was your main intention for reflecting his character and that electric quality as opposed to physical resemblance?
Yeah, I you know, we're making a film. You know, you're not. You know, it was important not to kind of get swamped down by a looky-likey version or a sound-alike version. It was much more important for us to catch the spirit of him, to catch the spirit of the man. I mean, not just for Mandela, but also all the other characters. The young man that plays Ahmed Kathrada is not physically like Ahmed Kathrada. Walter Sisulu, played by Tony Koroke, is not like Walter Sisulu, but, you know, he inhabits his character and he becomes this character. And it always felt right from the start that it was important to go from the inside out, rather than adopting kind of a voice and adopting a kind of prosthetic look, and try and, you get lost if you were trying to, you know, completely resemble that man. So coming from an inside out, and that's, you know, Idris undoubtedly is a star. You know, he's got this star quality, he's got an aura, he's got a humility, a humbleness about him, but also this electricity that comes off him. I mean, you know, and he's also a brave man. It's a brave man that steps into Mandela's shoes from the beginning, but in the way that we were doing it, in the real locations, you know, the locations of the churches and in the places in Soweto, you walk out there as Mandela, in front of 5,000 people that have lived through those atrocities that happened in that country. They will not, however accepting they were of us making this film, they would not, you know, take a lie or an untruth about their leader or any of what we were doing. So it's a brave man, and right from the beginning, Idris wanted to embrace that way of working. So yeah, he was my first choice, and I love him. He's a great, good guy, good man.
Brilliant. What was your impression of the televised memorial service? Because there's a divide between those that thought it was a bit of a shambles in the state and those that thought it just reflected the spirit and the love that people had for him.
I was en route to go. I was there at the funeral. I wasn't there at the memorial. The family asked Idris and I to go to the funeral, and so I'd caught bits and pieces of it on the television. Yeah, and I'd heard various things down in South Africa about it, you know, just You know, it looked. I don't know. It didn't. For me, I thought it did look a little bit of a. It looked like something that Mandela wouldn't have particularly liked. You know, I spoke to his daughters before I went to the funeral, and they were like, he wanted something very, very simple. It was interesting that it rained the whole time, that the heavens opened the whole time, and I heard that the crowd, I thought one of the funniest bits was when the crowd was trying to, you know, when they were trying to calm the crowd down. And I know from my experience of being in South Africa that crowd, they are the voice of truth, you know, so they were responding realistically. Apparently they were brilliant over Obama, but there was other reactions to other world leaders or other leaders that they were reacting strongly to. So I don't know, I wasn't there. You know, it was, I think what shone through about that period was the importance of his life, the importance of his legacy, and the celebration of the man. You know, I think that is what people in South Africa do. I was saddened that not the whole stadium was full of South Africans and people from Soweto and places around that area, but it was a celebration.
When you direct, do you think about the large cinema screen or television screen? Indeed, is there any difference in particular?
I think there is when you're making a movie, you're making it for the big screen. You're making it to see on the big screen, to immerse the audience in. You've got a captive audience who's sitting in the dark, and you're dropping that audience into that world, and you have their attention, and you're playing on a big screen. You're playing around the world. So I am aware of that. I am aware. It depends on the story, though. I'm aware of making sure that they have a fully immersive experience. And yeah, I am aware of the different stories that I'm telling and how I'm telling them. But it really goes back to the story. For Mandela, it was about, specifically, it was about making the film, because it is difficult with biopics, you know, period movies. It's kind of, you know, for a modern audience, when you've got kind of cartoon heroes and other kind of distracting box office draws, you know, you want to make sure that the film that you're making stands up against that. You know, you're making a film about a real man, and you don't want it to be like spinach, you know it's good for you, but you don't want to watch it. You want it to be visceral, you want it to be energetic, you want it to be fast-paced, you want it to have great car chases, you want it to have an epic quality, great vistas, great epic landscapes, but also to have a dynamism that is like any other modern movie. I was very conscious going into that, even though we were an independent South African movie, that it had to stand up against those Hollywood movies. I mean, the budget was a fraction of what a Hollywood movie is, but it had to stand up there with its production value. We shot it on 35mm. The crowds that you see are real, you know, and the sound that you hear around you is not done on a soundstage afterwards. It's done live while we were there. So we were conscious about making a big film, and it's Mandela, you know. I mean, it doesn't get bigger than that in terms of a real story about a real human being and what he achieved. So yeah, I was aware to make it for the cinema as a cinematic piece for audience to gather together in the dark and watch. Very much so.
So when critics say that the cinema experience is dying, do you believe that's wrong?
Not from what I've seen. I mean, what do you think?
I think it's wrong. I love going to the cinema. So.
I think it is. I think it's an important part of culture that we have. You know, I mean, the fantastic thing now is that you have home cinema, that you go and you can have great cinema in your own home and you can watch that. But there's nothing that is like going into a cinema with other people and experience a movie. When you've done that, for certain films, you know, I mean, it's an expensive thing going to the cinema, you know, and but you're gathering there together with other people, and it's an emotional experience, or it's a visceral experience, or you're seeing a spectacle. And I think it's an important part of modern culture. However much the TVs are getting better, and the HD and all of that, and the surround sound that you can get in your living room, nothing beats the cinema. Nothing beats that experience of the big screen. And you see audiences, they need it. They need to gather together and see cinema. I think what is at risk with cinema, because the multiplexes are so dominated by Hollywood comic book films is independent movies. That it's becoming increasing. When I was kind of cutting my teeth as a filmmaker, making short films, there were art house cinemas that you could go and see independent movies from different parts of the world, and it's a great way of understanding your culture and our culture. And you know, when I saw the early films of Spike Lee, for example, or Jane Campion, those movies really inspired me, because here was somebody from New Zealand talking about a young woman in New Zealand, or here was a guy talking about what was happening on the street of New York. And so, you know, that is an important part of culture that, you know, it's difficult for movies to find a way into the multiplexes, because you basically now go in on a Friday open, unless you open big, you're out the door, you know, it's because there's so much competition from Hollywood product.
Well, in Spike Lee's film Do the Right Thing, there's that song by Public Enemy, Fight the Power, and I wondered if you were interested in maybe even using part of that song, because there's so much music in Long Walk to Freedom.
Well, that was a little nod. In when they're rioting in the film, I put that in because I remember that time very well. You know, as a student, I saw Do the Right Thing. It was an inspiring movie, brilliant movie, and in Mandela we're charting the whole history of his life, but through that we use music through the different, as the consciousness of the world kind of then awakens to the plight of South Africans and apartheid. We use, you know, Gil Scott Heron and U2, and basically artists that were singing about the struggle, and yeah, it was something that I wanted to kind of nod to, you know, that track, and yeah, well spotted.
My last question is, given the success and acclaim of the film, were you interested in directing a film about the later part of his life and his third marriage?
I'm sure there's there's so many brilliant movies, you know, that could be made. But for me, that was it. You know, that him walking off into the sunset at the end of the movie is that was it. That was it for me. That it was making a film that was charting him. He was behind it. He knew what I was doing. He'd met me, and it was an honour for me to make it. You know, massive honour coming from where I come from, and I'm not South African. But no, that's my Mandela movie. I felt that was a complete experience, and a fantastic experience. But no, that's it now. I'll make another movie and do other things.
Have you got any plans for future films? Have you got anything?
Yeah, I'm making Tulip Fever, which yeah, it's fantastic. I've got a young actor called Alicia Vikander and a young actor called Dane DeHaan. It's basically a love story set in 17th century Amsterdam. I make it in England, and yeah, we're due to start shooting that in the spring. So yeah, that's what I'm planning and prepping for now.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, and all the best in the upcoming award ceremonies. And thank you again.
Well, thank you. Very, very good question. Really good questions. It was a pleasure to do it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.